Stephanie, your impressive career in government spans over 20 years in service to the state of California, as well as collaborating with other federal, state, and organizations. I'm going to ask you in a moment to comment on the evolution of security in government from when you began your career to where it is now. And I want to talk about the idea of, a lot of times we've seen in our world where an old technology is made new. But before we do that, I just want to highlight for our audience listening in, Stephanie's last post was at the California Department of Justice as Chief of Security. She also worked for CalPERS, State Controller's Office, and the Board of Equalization. Among her accolades, she was the founder of the California Interagency Security Group. She's been a pioneer in state privacy security. She's the founding member and current advisory board member of the Sacramento chapter of InfraGard. She is a work group contributor and representative for the California in the rewrite of IRS Publication 1075. This is tax information security guidelines for the federal, state, and local agency safeguards for protecting their tax information. I think, as many of us are aware, a lot of those things have been breached over the year. Stephanie also is a member of the Privacy Work Group with two other California tax entities in the IRS. She's a security expert and panelist on national forums for security and privacy. She's a member of the CLEAT Strategic Planning Group. She's a security expert and speaker on CGIS, security requirements. She's also a speaker for the State Cyber Symposium. So, you know, for anyone listening in today, what that means to you, this is someone that works not only here in the state of California, she's worked with many of our border states, she's worked across the country, and is working on many federal mandates that are going to get passed down on privacy and security. So with that, I'm going to bounce it back over to you. Talk to me a little bit, you know, on the evolution of security, and, you know, along that lines, we're seeing a lot of the old things made new. Comment on that for me.
Certainly. Back when I started into security in the mid-90s, PCs were being introduced into the workplace to replace basically dumb terminals.
Right.
All of us remember playing games, playing solitaire at the time to learn.
I will do that.
Yes, to learn how to operate the mouse and use the PC.
Even going to Windows school, which, you know, is now taught in 3rd and 4th grade. But I remember as a young executive, we had to go and learn, hey, click here, do this, this is how Windows works. It was a huge change in our world.
Absolutely. And those of us that had taken typewriting, dating us back even further, had a little bit more of advantage with the keyboard, where it seems to be second nature today to kids. But again, you know, at that point, security was evolving. We didn't have a lot of employees that were connected to the internet. In fact, back in the day, you had to receive special approval to be internet connected. So our big things were antivirus, which was in its infancy. We used multiple antiviruses because one company couldn't contain everything. So you had different antivirus at the desktop, the server level, and various places in the network. And from that, our biggest concern was, again, content filtering.
Right.
We didn't want our employees going to inappropriate sites because we didn't want to make anyone's top 10 list at the time for inappropriate content or misuse of public funds by going to inappropriate places. Right. So from there we evolved into more emerging technologies. We saw firewalls beginning to expand into being able to do different things. We saw the emergence of malware and companies coming out to combat malware. The biggest things we saw in the network area were the layering. We moved from flat networks to layered, tiered architecture. We saw security move from the network group, which had been primarily access controls and privilege management, along with settings on firewalls, network configurations, to actually a security team. You saw the emergence of information security officers, and sometimes it was them and their team of them, and then you began to have other staff. And so security actually became its own entity.
Well, and for the longest time, you would have just chief information officer. Everything was under that person's umbrella, and really, you know, what a chief information officer does is very different than what a chief information security officer should be doing.
Absolutely. And we saw the emergence of breaking away the chief information security officer from the CIO into more of a bridge between the executive group and the business group and the IT group. We've seen it circle back in other places. In California state government, we saw it roll back under the CIO. So there has been a lot of change. Lately, the biggest words that we hear out there are the advanced persistent threats, the APTs, the malicious code. We've moved into not just malware and phishing attacks and social engineering, no longer concerned about the early days of phone phreaking. If you ask a kid that today, they probably have no idea what you're talking about. Into managed attacks, DDoS attacks, voice over IP attacks, all of those types of things. And we've seen some of these traditional appliances, security, firewalls.
Well, even this summer, a lot of the universities around the country, there was the DDoS for Bitcoin, DDoS BC, where they were getting held ransom if they didn't fix things that were wrong with their security. They were going to get shut down, or they had to pay the Bitcoin ransom. And you know, just even recently here in our state, there was a situation, one of the city governments, where that happened to them.
Yes, ransomware is a big concern these days. And again, you know, we've seen the evolution of all of this, and all of the attacks change, the threat actors change. It's no longer the curious kid trying to go out there to see what they might be able to break into, but you see attacks from nation states, orchestrated attacks, hacktivists. Hacktivism is a big concern.
I think one of the most recent examples, when we look at the difficult situation that happened in Ferguson, Missouri, where last summer all of us followed that story, and anyone listening in, when you have any kind of social powder keg situation, whether it's a protest, whether it's a physical calamity where harm's brought, you could potentially have a powder keg on your hands. And I think your point back, it's as we've watched this evolution, it's not if you're going to get hacked, it's when. So my question with all this, we talk about sometimes in our world, we've all been around a little while, and we've watched some things that are new, that are very new, but then we've seen that in our careers, but we've also seen some things that are old and are becoming new. How's that impacting the security world right now?
Those types of social events that trigger emotions in people, trigger concerns from nation states or social activist groups. They all play into the security concerns that most of us have, whether it be our identity that's being hacked, or your services being taken offline. And with that, we've seen the appliances, the new next-gen softwares, old technology being made new. You're seeing basically a lot of the firewalls that are being touted as next-gen technology that are no longer just simply a firewall, but they also protect against content filtering, malicious code, etc. You're seeing all kinds of different things being changed. The original security as a service, managed service type of model that used to basically just monitor your network bandwidth, antivirus, content filtering, emerge into fully staffed security ops centers that have highly trained security analysts behind them working with you and your team, a lot of them with very high level security clearances. And so we've seen the change in some of these basic principles move into technology and technology services basically on steroids.
Okay. I have a question for you. I'm sitting in a leadership position and I want to make sure I'm secured. I don't want to be the guy on the front page of the daily paper that says I've been breached and this has happened. But just because you're adhering to compliance, let me just, for folks listening in, we have compliance like NIST, COBIT, PCI, HIPAA, GLBA, SOX, FIPS, ISO 2700. So we have a lot of things to be compliant to. My question for you, do those automatically guarantee that you're secure or safe if you're compliant?
That's a good question, and the short answer is absolutely not. Compliance does not equal security. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that it does. You will have an audit come out, your executives will think that if you adhere to the basic security standards and frameworks that you've mentioned, that you will be secure. And unfortunately, it doesn't equal security. You can have all of those things in place, and a change can be made to the network. Malicious code can come in through a phishing email, etc., and you are no longer in compliance, although from an audit perspective you may be. So again, the big misconception here is that a lot of times companies think that if they just do these things and they pass their audit, they are compliant, that they are secure. What those things do for you is help generate security funding, typically, and more money and dollars spent in your security program.
Okay.
I see a lot too where customers kind of just do the minimum expectation, and I think the bigger challenge and what's at risk is the integrity of your customers, and you look at the impact it has on your customer base and their business, could put you out of business. One breach.
I want to talk about that in a moment, about the cost of it and time to detect. But before we get there, let me ask you one other question. Last month, you participated in a panel called Hackers and the Human Factor. And it was, you were part of about a 9-person panel from all over the country, state, local, county government, as well as higher education. And you all were talking about the human side to gaining access to a network. Share with our audience a little bit what you learned being on that panel of subject matter experts.
What I learned was that we all continue to struggle with security and keeping our environment secure. There is no magic bullet for security. That, again, it's a combination of due diligence, good security architecture, practices, highly trained and skilled staff, and continuous monitoring of your networks if you're internet facing.